So, you all saw Bill Battistone tonight. You've seen him many times. He's now president of the congregation, but once he was a mere board member and the host of the podcast 15 Minutes with a Mensch. You're listening to 15 Minutes a Mensch. I'm Bill Battistone. Or 15 Minutes with a Mensch. I'm Bill Battistone. You can have him say it. He says it better than I do. 3 years ago, a few days before Yom Kippur, Bill pulled me aside to be the guest on the Yom Kippur edition of the show. At that time, it was like 3 days before Yom Kippur. I had no sermon topic, and I was beginning to panic. As we talked, I said, I think Yom Kippur is about hope. And so hope became my sermon topic that year. This year, after a devastating year in so many ways, I would like to amend what I said to Bill. Yom Kippur is about hope. But here's the thing. So is Jewish life. To be Jewish is to have hope. Jewish hope is not the same as everyday hope. Rabbi Sharyn calls it life-sustaining hope, and she suggests that it is often born of grief or pain. This kind of hope lets us keep breathing and standing, even when we don't think we can. After the pogrom of October 7th, and the unrelenting grief upon grief upon grief that has followed, the seemingly endless loss of life, the frightening rise in anti-Semitism, the tortured conversations some of us are having with our children and friends. This year, our hope has indeed been born of grief and pain. Someone created in Ashamnu, the confession prayer that we did a few minutes ago, a new one called Complementary Confession for 5785. It was written as a way to process the year since October 7th and the communal trauma from that day. And even as that day was loathsome and horrible, many of us experienced personal challenges and anguish over this past year as well. The prayer speaks to both kinds of suffering. I'm not going to read the whole prayer. Here are just a few sentences so you get a sense of the mood of the prayer. Ahavnu, we loved. Bachinu, we cried. Gilinu, we discovered new strengths in ourselves. Darashnu, we called on them again and again. Himshachnu, we continued to conduct our work, our lives, to run our homes, to take care of children and elders. Yeshavnu, we sat together. Machalnu, we forgave each other for small harms, perhaps not enough. While the whole acrostic speaks to resilience, a few verses resonated deeply with me. Tzipinu, we looked forward to good news. Rakadnu, we danced at happy occasions despite it all. And we will yet build, recover, and repair. These last few lines help us recognize what I am beginning to understand, what I'm beginning to process, something called doing hope. Doing hope. It's active and intentional. It's a mindset. It's a decision. And it is quintessentially Jewish. So let's dig into this idea of doing hope by looking closely at each of those 3 lines, the ones I just said at the end, beginning with Tzipinu, we looked forward to good news. Rabbi and poet Hannah Yerushalmi published the poem In His Pocket in August, after the miraculous IDF rescue of hostage Quaid Farhan Al-Qad, a Bedouin father of 11. For context, the poem plays on a teaching about Reb Simcha Bunim, an 18th century Hasidic Rabbi. I'm sure some of you have heard this. According to the legend, the Rabbi always carried with him 2 slips of paper, one for each pocket. One was inscribed with the saying from the Talmud, "For my sake the world was created." On the other, he wrote a phrase from the Torah, I am but dust and ashes. For my sake the world was created, I am but dust and ashes. He would take out and read each slip of paper as necessary for the given moment. The point of the story, we should be prepared for the times we feel big, maybe we need to get a little smaller, and the times we feel small and need to get a little bigger. Rabbi Yerushalmi, Hannah Yerushalmi, the poet, suggests that we need a third slip of paper so that we are prepared for joy. This is her poem. The rabbis advised, keep two truths in your pocket. One should read, I am but dust and ashes, and the other should read, the entire world was created for me. An 8-year-old has something else in his pocket, confetti. Why? It's his emergency confetti. He says, during these raw days, he carries it with him everywhere, just in case there is good news. You likely had one or more of the following reactions to the poem. You wondered who was going to clean up the confetti. You immediately thought of some good news, something worthy of emergency confetti. And 3, you resolved to make your own emergency confetti. The point, doing hope means actively looking for good news and being prepared to celebrate it when you find it. Those of us following the hostage situation closely are still and forever hopeful they will be returned to their homes. And we should be prepared with an extra supply of confetti for that day. Our best teachers in this pursuit of staying hopeful have been the families of the hostages themselves. You might remember families yelling to the hostages through bullhorns and microphones outside of Gaza. They believed, or they wanted to believe, or they acted as if they believed, that if their voices were loud enough, they would reach deep into the tunnels where their loved ones languished. That's doing hope. The weekly hostage vigils throughout the Jewish world, including here on the corner of Murray and Darlington, that's doing hope too. Active and intentional, a decision to hope. When the 6 hostages were found murdered after 325 days in captivity, we were shocked and utterly dismayed. We had somehow let ourselves believe they would go home. Was it because their families believed? Was it because we grew up with happy endings and still yearn for happy endings and somehow expect them? Was it because they were so young, so pure, so good? Who would kill that? One of those 6 hostages was Hirsch Goldberg Polin, who because of his parents' unflagging hope and advocacy, we came to know. Rachel Goldberg Polin, his mother, started wearing a piece of masking tape with the number of days the hostages had been in captivity, just a torn piece of tape. A new piece of tape each day with the number of days the hostages had been in captivity. A new piece of tape each day. One day for each day in hell. Have you noticed that Hirsch's parents, Rachel and John, are still wearing the taped numbers, although their son is dead? Today, day 371, and they are still thinking about, caring about, and working toward the release of the rest of the hostages. These amazing parents, and others like them, are teaching us every day that it's okay to have hope. We must have hope, even when things end up in the worst way possible. They are still after everything, looking for good news. If they can do it, you and I can do it. There will always be good news. Think about having your confetti ready. Rakadnu, we danced at happy occasions. 6 years ago, on October 28th, 2018, the day after the synagogue shooting here in Pittsburgh, Rabbi Jeremy Marquise, who was then at Beth Shalom, was getting married in Los Angeles. His wedding had been set for that day, October 28th. It was this heartbreaking situation for them, wanting to be 2 places at the same time, needing to grieve and to celebrate at the same time. That week, Rabbi Marquise reminded us of a famous lesson from the Talmud, a lesson on what to do when grief and joy meet. The rabbis asked, when a funeral procession and a wedding party meet on a narrow street, who goes first? They determined, the rabbis do, that the funeral procession should reroute so as to allow the wedding to take place on time. In other words, joy and gladness get the right of way. I see this as another brilliant attempt at doing hope. We decide to choose gladness. Rabbi Marquise and his bride, their families and friends danced at their wedding because there is a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance. And did you know that the party or festive meal after a Brit Milah is an obligatory part of the ritual you have to eat? It's a mitzvah to celebrate when wonderful things happen. A final note about dancing. There's a new documentary about October 7th. A Times of Israel article said, quote, "It reveals the hours of utter fear and rampant bloodshed as thousands of partygoers attempted to flee the Hamas terrorists." That's the end of the quote. The film is raw and sad. So what did the producers name it? We Shall Dance Again. There it is again, that incessant Jewish hope. Making the film was an act of doing hope. Seeing it is another. Dancing afterwards? I don't dance. I hate dancing. But if I were to dance about anything, it would be to celebrate life, youth, innocence, bravery, and hope. Rebuild, recover, repair. Our final investigation is into the last line of that confession for 5785, the line that reads, "We will yet rebuild, recover, repair." And for this one, we'll stick closer to home. And by the way, Rabbi Daniel Feldman of Temple Sinai and I have agreed that tonight we will put forth a common message about the Unification Project. We are, of course, not giving the same sermon, but we are united, along with members of the steering committee, in the belief that this conversation is critical and timely. The Unification Project is not a matter of life or death. It is not born of a catastrophe. But it is important to the future of the Pittsburgh Reformed Jewish community, which is struggling, as are Jewish communities everywhere, with keeping up with the changing Jewish world. Just about now, Rabbi Feldman is speaking the following words to his community. I picked out a paragraph of his sermon. Right now, any one of us could drive down Negley Avenue from here toward the zoo. On that ride, we would pass a number of buildings that once housed synagogues. We can still notice the beauty of the buildings, smile at the memories of those now defunct congregations. They serve the Jews of our community well, yet they are all gone. Our choice is all about what a drive down Forbes Avenue or Fifth Avenue might look like 10, 20, or 30 years from now. Do we want our offspring to look and point and say, that building used to be a synagogue? Or do we want future generations to point and say, that building and the people inside, they represent the beating heart of a vibrant Jewish community. We have the opportunity, before there is a crisis, to examine our options for collaboration, partnership, and/or unification with Temple Sinai. And although absolutely no decisions have been made, we believe that together we can build something exciting, something dynamic, new, vibrant. Simply having the conversation is doing hope. Over the past 6 months, Road of Shalom and Temple Sinai have already collaborated on a number of projects, services mostly, over the summer especially. And for the second day of Rosh Hashanah and Shabbat Shuvah, that was the Shabbat in between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, our gatherings are joyous and warm, the music is beautiful, the camaraderie sincere. And on Simchat Torah, October 24th, at our joint service, there will be dancing. At the very end of Yom Kippur, at the end of Ne'ilah, the closing service, after the triumphant shofar blasts, the last words in the traditional liturgy are, L'shana haba'ah b'Yerushalayim, next year in Jerusalem. The words themselves are a way to do hope, to express the notion that we will continue to build and repair and find joy and maybe even throw a pocketful of confetti and dance. The traditional closing words, L'Shana Haba B'Yerushalayim, they express the belief, the hope that tomorrow can be better than today, and that we have a part in making that happen. Amos Oz, author and thinker, related a parable that is new to me, and I'm sorry about that, because it's beautiful and inspirational, and if we and I could have benefited from knowing it all along, we would have been better off. This is the parable. I believe that if one person is watching a huge calamity, let's say a conflagration, a fire, there are always three principal options. Run away as fast as you can and let those who cannot run burn. Write a very angry letter to the editor of your paper demanding that the responsible person be removed from office with disgrace, or for that matter, launch a demonstration. This is Amos Oz, not me. Bring a bucket of water and throw it on the fire. And if you don't have a bucket, bring a glass. And if you don't have a glass, use a teaspoon. Everyone has a teaspoon. And yes, I know a teaspoon is little and the fire is huge, but there are millions of us, and each one of us has a teaspoon. Now, I would like to establish the order of the teaspoon, he says. People who share my attitude, not the runaway attitude or the letter attitude, but the teaspoon attitude, I would like them to walk around wearing a little teaspoon on the lapel of their jacket so that we know that we are in the same movement, in the same order, the order of the teaspoon. With all humility, Amos Oz, we don't need a lapel pin. But if each one of us had but one teaspoon of hope, of Jewish hope, one teaspoon of intention to do hope, and we put all of our teaspoons together, what if we did that? Shana Tova.